this is our first virtual event, I'm going to ask for a couple of things. First off, I'm going to say, please give us some grace. If we have any technical difficulties whatsoever, just, try to be patient. I had a counselor, he used to say to me all the time, he'd say, patience isn't about how long you can wait. It's about how you behave while you're waiting. So really, that's something for me. There's also going to be a chat feature on the bottom of your screen. And, we would really love to know where you're from. So if you can drop a chat, tell us where you're zooming in from, that would be fantastic. Regardless of where you're coming from, we're grateful to have you with us. And we hope that you can sit back, relax, open your hearts and open your minds to what is in store for you. So 2019 marked Fresh Start's 27th, and we are now 7 months into our 28th year of existence. It's amazing, but it is also bittersweet as we've lost so many last year to addiction. So as we do every year in the spirit of gratitude and remembrance, we'd like to pause for a moment of silence for those we lost last year to addiction. In addition, we also want to hold a moment of silence for a couple of very special supporters of Fresh Start Recovery Centre. Many of you know them. If you're with us in person at this, and the two people that we're going to on top of our men are Ken King and Larry McCook. If you were with us standing in our gymnasium, you'd be facing this bank of windows in the back of the gym where the names are memorialized. So if you could, with me for a moment, pause and think about those that we've lost and we've loved. Thank you. The cover of our 2019 annual report features one word. That word has immense power. That word is we. We're going to, our 2019 annual report can be found on our website at freshstartrecovery.ca. It's been an extraordinary 27 years, from humble beginnings to today's 40,000 square foot, purpose-built 50-bed recovery center with an additional 46 post-treatment housing beds, 3 separate apartments, and ever-expanding alumni, board, supporters, staff, and community partners. And even though we've grown physically, we remain grounded to our humble beginnings, knowing that what we cannot do alone, we can do together. And some of you have heard that. We are very grateful. We all have an abundance of life experience, and it's not always pretty. Some of us have experienced ill health, financial loss, broken homes and relationships, and we've lost those we love. Look at what we're experiencing now. Not one of us can escape the pain of being human. And my kids sum it up very well. They say, Dad, everyone has a story. When we look at the surface of one another, we can sometimes miss what lies beneath. But every single person is worthy of love and support, regardless of their station in life. Every one of you here tonight with us is amazing, incredible, and you are a beautiful human being, whether you believe it or not. Speaking of amazing people, I want to introduce you to a phenomenal group of individuals who selflessly step up every day all year long. On the screen are the Fresh Start staff with a combined aggregate of over 350 years of recovery, and our volunteer board members. And we also have hundreds of alumni that we would like to recognize. They are an amazing source of inspiration for our newcomers. In addition to our volunteer board members, staff and alumni, there are hundreds of people who volunteer at Fresh Start throughout the year. These people give selflessly of their time and talents, helping in the kitchen, in programming, fundraising, especially in events, in order to support half of our annual budget. Obviously, with all our events primarily being canceled this year, it's been a bit of an issue. Events such as our annual 12-stop motorcycle ride for recovery, which, rest assured, Lisa and Jillian are working on right now to bring a virtual type event to you August 22nd. And many of you have asked, how can I get the raffle tickets? Yes, you can still get the raffle tickets for the motorcycle online at our website. Safe to say, we are incredibly grateful to all our volunteer support. So there's many of you. If you're an alumni, if you're a volunteer, if you've ever had a hand in anything that we have ever done, take one moment, please, and know that you are loved and we appreciate you beyond words. So now, part of the evening that you've all zoomed in for. Panelists, are you ready? Are you feeling nervous? Everybody's doing okay?
Have we started? Is this started?
Yes, Scott, we've begun. We have begun.
Okay, good.
So this is where we get to speak to some inspiring friends who have had some difficult is a small world, life experiences, and they've transformed those experiences into deep meaning. Every single one of our panelists has a bio, and you can find those bios on our social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, etc. We just couldn't have enough time to get through those. We wanted to give our guests more time to speak tonight. So without further ado, maybe I believe we have it on the screens there. I want to do the announcing like Scott does. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Jan and Steffanie Gryckiewicz, Marshall Smith, Joy Pavelich, and Scott and Anne Oake.
You just failed the audition.
Totally right. Oh no, I'm waiting for the call.
Yeah.
So it's really great to see you all. You're surrounded by people who support and admire you and your individual journeys. And so on behalf of everyone who's watching, I want to say to you, thank you for being vulnerable with us tonight. I know it's going to be vulnerable. The questions I'm going to ask are for us to help to get to know you better. And so some of those questions I'm going to direct to the whole group. Most of them I'm going to direct to the whole group, but some I'm going to ask individually. So I'm going to feel my way through it, and we're going to have a wonderful night. So are you guys ready? Everybody ready? Let's see. Hands up. Hands up. We're good. Okay. So then let's start out with a big one. This is a big one, and this one I'm going to open up to everybody. And I'm going to leave it to you, as we discussed earlier, to choose who wants to go first. If we have that awkward long pause, I'm going to pick somebody. Okay, so let's start. Given that our theme for this year is we, tell us what your experience has been surrounding COVID-19 that speaks about we and togetherness. What's been hard, and what have you found in terms of silver linings? Who would like to start? How about Steffanie with her hand up?
I put my hand up. I'm usually not that brave. I think COVID has been incredibly difficult for the obvious reasons, the isolation, the not being able to be around people. Both Jan and I are very social people, so that part has been difficult. I have an elderly mom, so we avoided seeing her. I think some of the very hardest things for me with COVID have been the amount of fear that you see in people. People are scared, the unknown of people, and incredibly, incredibly difficult to just witness loss of life around the world. No discrimination, no barrier, just a complete unknown, and you don't know how it's going to impact or affect you. So I think for me, that has been the hardest part. The isolation, there are ways around that. People are figuring out how to connect. The silver lining that I would say with COVID is a lot of times in life, people face adversity and trying times and tragedy, and they face them alone. COVID, just by the nature of COVID, is something that the world is facing together. Nobody can avoid it. Nobody is immune from it. We're all impacted by it, and we are facing it together. So the silver lining to me would be that if COVID hadn't happened, we'd all be out doing our daily lives, going about our daily business. And we would not be able to witness these unbelievable acts of strength and courage and compassion that the world is showing to one another. And hopefully it's something that we as people and humans can carry it forward. I think we're all learning something that we wouldn't have if COVID wasn't impacting us right now. And it is very challenging.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. Jan, did you want to add anything there?
I just, first of all, I know how tough it's been all over, and I want to really thank the first responders and the frontline people that have had to deal with this. And I'm very proud of the fact that Fresh Start was able to deal with this and keep the men safe. I think, I'm just going to echo what Steffanie said. We're both very social people. Our son is deployed. He's in Europe right now. He's a sergeant in the Canadian military. We haven't seen him for a long time. I think I'm happy that he's not here and he's relatively safe. But I think I agree with Steffanie. I think in the end, ultimately, many, many families and people have made, sacrifice losing their families. I think in the end, ultimately, though, I'm hoping and I believe that the world become a closer place because of this. It's like Steph said, it's impacted every corner of the world. And there's been so much compassion shown from these frontline workers, from people working in the seniors' homes, that I think in the end, ultimately, it will change the face of how people do things. And I think, ultimately, I believe that people are going to be closer together from afar.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. When I listen to both your answers, beautiful answers, and I know that everyone watching can resonate with those. And I also think in terms of addiction and recovery, your answers could overlay those as well. So that was awesome. Who else would like to answer that?
It's an interesting, it's a great question. For me, being in recovery, I often thought through that process of isolation. I can remember a lot of times, being in my condo in Edmonton, looking out the window, thinking to myself, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the gifts that recovery has given me, the ability to sit with myself, and the ability to sort of work with that and be okay alone. It wasn't always like that for me. Through addiction and through my recovery process, it would have been unbelievably uncomfortable for me to have to isolate or be alone or be away from people, to be with my own thoughts, during that process. And so while I was really grateful for that aspect of my recovery, I also had a lot of empathy for what people must have been going through out there, who may not be necessarily used to just sitting with themselves in isolation, right? And the amount of discomfort, mentally, physically, the amount of disruption that can cause to them without an outlet to work on that. So I do think there's some silver linings to it, though. I think if we're having an honest conversation, I also think about the amount of commercialism and materialism and the amount of, fast world that we're in. I have to think that, as tragic as this pandemic, is, it's given me some pretty serious pause to think about the things that are really important in my life, right? And sort of pre-pandemic, the things that I really took for granted, and how important those things are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Marshall. Yeah, no, I can totally relate to an awful lot of that. How about Scott and Anne? And Scott, I mean, you've kind of been on a vacation, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's what I do normally when I'm working. Same thing as now. I guess the silver lining is for Anne and I think this Sunday we'll be married 40 years.
You think?
Well, I wasn't quite sure the date, but I always joke that our marriage has worked because I've only been around for 20 of those years. In the last 2 months, though, I've more than made up for the missing 20 years. And the good news is we're still married. We were really worried when COVID-19 took hold the way it did that our project, construction of the Bruce Oake Recovery Centre, would be halted. And that gave us a lot of pause to think about the most vulnerable of our population, the people who will need to take advantage of what they're taking advantage of now at Fresh Start and eventually the Bruce Oake Recovery Centre. But we were deemed an essential service, so construction has continued. It's still on schedule, and will be open for business in just over a year, modeling the Fresh Start program. That's a real silver lining, because if you think about it, the demand for services like Fresh Start and the Bruce Oake Recovery Centre, when it's up and running, will be through the roof on the other side of this pandemic. It'll be far greater than it was when it was already probably overwhelming. So we're very, very grateful that we're still on schedule.
That's excellent.
And people are still donating regularly on our website, and they haven't given up on us, and so money's coming in, so we're very grateful for that.
The donations have always been impactful, but I would say even more impactful now because of the crying need there will be for the services of places like Fresh Start and the Bruce Oake Recovery Centre on the other side of the pandemic.
No, it's been great to watch the growth. I watched the update video the other day, and I'm just fantastic. It's good on you guys. I can't wait to see you there to cut the ribbon. So that's great. And Joy, do you want to take a shot at that?
Sure. Actually, I work from home. So I worked from home the past year and a half. It hasn't changed my life a lot. What I miss the most, though, is those big family gatherings like Easter, Mother's Day. Those were always typical, times where we'd stop and just, we're all busy. We're a busy family. And so those were the moments when we'd stop and we'd get together. And so we didn't do that. And those were two big celebrations that I actually really missed. And I think it was Marshall was talking about the pause, and I actually have loved it. It's, not diminishing in any way what everyone's going through, what a large portion of the world is going through. But I do think in this pause that I'm really not looking forward to going back towards that level of frantic life. And, so a lot of people have said maybe we need to rethink what normal looks like after this. And I think my normal is going to be a lot slower and a lot quieter.
Yeah, I've really appreciated the pause as well. I think a lot of people can relate to that. And the essential service piece, I would applaud our provincial government here for making, addiction treatment an essential service during this time. But I think one of the biggest things I miss is I miss hugs. I miss that physical contact with people, and that uncertain feeling that you feel now and again, I think it's just grief. So question 2 for 10,000 and a chance at the Chevrolet. In terms of your own personal journey, your growth, your success, and your recovery, what event occurred for you that in hindsight was a moment that you realized you couldn't do this life alone, that you could not do this alone? Do you have anything that stands out in your own life that, I know for some it's right close, but when was that realization you couldn't do this alone?
I'll take a step. Oh, go ahead, Joy. Go ahead.
For me, it was really when Eric died. I've really always been a single parent. My ex-husband is a pilot. So it was, and that single parenting, and my boys are all bad enough to be interesting. They're boxers, they're fighters, they're tough guys. And I really always felt like with these 3 guys in my corner, there's nothing that I really can't do. And this give and take in life, where if somebody gives something to you, you give back, and life's good. There's a balance. And when Eric died, I was so crippled. I still have trouble talking about it. But that feeling of not knowing how I could go on, and a community that really was there for us. And, I remember trying to write thank you cards, and I knew I couldn't. It was the hug at the grocery store. It was somebody who said, hey, I'm praying for you and your boys. And I remember thinking, Eric's friends, I'd go for lunch, and someone would have bought me lunch while I was there. And I remember after that thinking I could spend the rest of my life thanking people, and I'd never get through this list. So I'm just I'm just going to pay it forward, because that was when I really knew that, yeah, there's no such thing as balance. There's just, you know, the gifts of goodness in times like this. And that was definitely my moment of change.
I would say, and our sympathies to you, Joy. We feel your pain, believe you me. For us, for Anne and I, it was probably one night about 15 years ago. We'd been in Nova Scotia, and Bruce got into some trouble, drug related. We got into the house upon our arrival from Nova Scotia and realized that he had a serious addiction issue. And from that point on, that really was the start, I guess, of the odyssey that ended tragically. But from that point on, for about the next, I don't know, 5 years or so, we had a lot of decisions to make, and we weren't alone in making those decisions. We had a lot of support, but most of all, we had each other, and we never argued over anything when it came to how we should help Bruce, what we should do. We were always in concert. Unlike, I guess, some families who can't get it together, blame each other, whatever. We never, ever made a decision that we weren't in concert on. And that helped us get through the next 5 or 6 years. And along the way, as I say, we had a lot of support from people. And that, I guess, would have been that night that we realized that we needed to be together, and we needed a lot of help, and we got it.
Yeah, many good friends, and Darcy was right there with us, you know, and Bruce confided in him, and so we all worked together.
Awesome, thanks. Jan, Steph?
I would say ours is a little bit different with our son. We, for me, I know exactly when that moment came that there was no way that I or we could even do this alone. With Mike, his kind of addiction lifespan was so condensed and so short, and what I've learned, that some people could take 10, 15, 20 years to go through. Mike did everything in his life quickly, and he decided, I guess, he was going to do this quickly as well. When he came to us and said that, you know, he was struggling and he had a problem with drug use and using the drugs, I guess for me initially, I've just always been the kind of person who, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to deal with this. This can't be happening to us, so we're not going to be in that statistic of this is going to be catastrophic. This is just a little blip, and I'm going to do the same things. I'm going to love you more. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to hold the family together. His sister had gone to university in the States, so we didn't tell his sister what was going on. We didn't tell our closest friends. We didn't even tell our family members what was going on. We just tried to deal with it as a family. And it kind of paralleled what Mike was going through. As his addiction got worse, kind of my desire to hold it together got worse. And as he became more frail and no ability to control anything, that's kind of what happened in my life. It became overwhelming. I couldn't hold it together anymore. It was consuming. The hypervigilance and trying to have all your ducks in a row was hard. And the moment that I realized we couldn't do it alone was the first time we took him to Renfrew detox. And he was so sick. We knew we had to get there in the morning because they don't accept a lot of people. There isn't beds for everyone. He was so sick, and he was a skeleton of a person I thought I knew. He had to stay in the car. I had to wait inside. When the nurse came out for the assessment, he physically had to come inside to Renfrew, and he physically could hardly walk in on his own. And it was that moment that I knew I couldn't do it alone, because at that moment I actually thought he was going to die. And so from that point, we did reach out for help, and we did discuss the addiction and what it was doing to our family. We looked at a lot of other resources, both in Calgary, outside of the province. But it still was a pretty private thing that we kept to people who shared like interests and like situations, because it is a very frightening thing to go through, and it's a really, really hard thing to talk to people about. It's a hard thing to talk to your friends about, because they're talking about great things about their kid or their kids, and I don't think they know what to say, and a lot of times I didn't know what to say, but we definitely knew we couldn't do it alone. But we probably haven't done it with our big group of friends. It's been a group of friends and a group of people that we have let into our lives and let them help us now. But I know we can't do it alone. And as much as Mike wanted long-term recovery, he did find that recovery. It was 3 years. And as like Joy, when Mike did pass away, that was another instant where we need more. Like that just compounded, I think, what we were going through. And so going forward, I think both Jan and I would believe we can't do it alone. We know we can't do it alone. For both of us have different reasons for that, but it's hard to admit that as a mom, you can't fix it. You can't love him enough. You can't talk to him enough. It's hard for a mom not to be able to make things right with their kids. So that was hard for me.
Jan, do you want to say?
No, I just think that for me, finding out that Michael had a substance abuse problem was very tough. I think that I knew some of the alumni from Fresh Start, and we did get some help, to get Mike looked after and into Renfrew. But I've always been kind of a wee person, and I've realized in life, even in my business life, that you can't do everything on your own. You have to trust and rely on people. I think we reached out to people that, like Steph said, that they knew our family, and we had no problem sharing some of the information. It was actually more difficult, and I know this is going to sound odd, but it was actually more difficult to discuss it with some of our family members outside of our nuclear family with, Joe and Danny. It was difficult to discuss with them because they had that old school kind of attitude. Well, just quit, just tell them to quit. And, I knew that was going to be the answer from some of them, or the response. And Steph and I I said before, we're very social, but we're also very guarded with, what we're prepared to share with people. But I realized with Mike when, he struggled, we went to some of the counseling that you provided at Fresh Start. We shared it with our closest friends. And I think the toughest thing for me was to get in alignment with both Danielle and Joe. Joey, being a soldier, he's a pretty tough guy too, and he, doesn't understand why, probably you can't quit. Danny, like Steph said, was away, and the first time she saw her brother when he was actually staying at Fresh Start when we picked her up at the airports, and that was tough to share. But in the end, ultimately, we knew as a family that we could survive, or do our best to survive through that whole process.
Thanks, Jan. Marshall?
I think, for me, I was in active addiction, what I consider to be fairly hardcore active addiction, for about 4.5 years, but had a lengthy time that I spent in alcoholism, from the time that I was 15 up until, drug use, which came around my early 30s, and lasted for a period of about 4.5 years, where I was, wound up, my illness wound up bringing me all the way down to the streets of Vancouver, where I lived in a shipping container under the Granville Bridge for 4.5 years. It was, it's a difficult and brutal existence, as many people who are watching can appreciate. And I think, it is such a challenging, baffling illness. You don't really understand. For me, I didn't really have a comprehension of just how sick I was during that time. things seemed actually very normal. And in my addiction, I could convince myself of anything. And did often. The end came for me really with intervention from a couple of very effective Vancouver police officers who were, had a bit of a velvet baton. And they were, really good at connecting with me on a regular basis, encouraging me into treatment, encouraging me to get out of this life, being tough when they had to, but encouraging when they needed to. And I remember one day very specifically, it rains a lot in Vancouver. It was pouring rain for weeks on end. My feet hurt. I was wet. I was hungry, and I was done. And I reached out to one of these guys that I had been connecting with, and took them up on the offer to treatment. I went to treatment. I enjoyed it. I took it seriously. But it wasn't something that I would have just woke up one morning and decided to do. It did require an element of assertive pressure from external forces, right? I wasn't going to come out of that by myself. And the pressure from family wasn't enough. Pressure from social norms wasn't enough. So I'm very grateful for that, and I don't think we give enough credit to our folks in law enforcement who are out there connecting in a very compassionate way with a lot of people on the street. I think we can be too quick to judge that. Those relationships are really important, and to me, that made a huge difference.
Thanks, Marshall. The reason I asked the question, I was thinking how it connects to our annual report, and funny enough, we can sit here and we can be vulnerable, and we're all pretty close to this, but as you know, there's an awful lot of people out there that are still, they don't reach out for help. They say they can do it on their own and that kind of thing. And that's just, it's not the case for us. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of basic needs, the third level is to love and be loved and to belong. And so I think that what all of you said reminds us all that we're not alone, even if our head tells us we are at times. And I'm looking at the chat box down here, and we had asked at the beginning of the panel, we said, tell us where you're from. You've got people watching you from all over Canada. It's quite amazing. So, and some really brilliant comments, a lot of support for you. So that's fantastic. So so Fresh Start Recovery Center, we're big fans of the solution. I know that you all are part of, your focus is solution. So if you could say, in a handful of words, like, what does recovery look like to you? Because we all know a lot about addiction. We all know a lot about the problem. What is recovery to you? What does that look like to you? And so, circle gets the square. I'm going to go with Anne.
I think for us, when Bruce was in recovery, it was a beautiful thing. He was happy, he was healthy, he had a great job, but he could never stay in recovery. So he had 4 stints at rehab, and the longest one was 11 months. He was sober, and he just didn't seem to be able to keep it up.
Recovery for us, for as brief as we saw it, is a beautiful thing. And Anne is right. The 11 months that Bruce spent at the long-term facility with Simon House in Calgary, which runs a program very similar to Fresh Starts, were the best 11 months of his addicted life, and the best 11 months of our life when he was on his journey, because he had hope and we had hope. We know that active addiction, as a family, active addiction is ugly. And we saw it many times at its absolute worst. Along comes recovery, and suddenly you think, there's our kid, he's back. And we've got a chance here for him to have a good life, and for us to have him in our life. as I say, the glimpses at recovery were all too short, and it didn't work in the end, but we saw enough of recovery to know it is a beautiful thing.
Joy, do you want to, what is recovery to you? What does that mean to you?
To me, so I'm a journalist by trade, so words are really, really important. I think of, you know, to recover something is to find something that's been lost. And, you know, I'm not someone who's lived with addiction myself, but it's always been, you know, I've been at the epicenter of it for my entire life. And so I think of the things that a person loses in addiction, like hope, trust, peace, you know, and so I think for me, recovery is a return for that person to who they were before, right? Where they find those missing pieces. And it takes raw courage. So to get there, right? To search for them, to believe that you can reach for that and find it. So to me, courage is the face of recovery.
Thanks, Joy. Jan, Steph?
I think for me, I'm going to say that I kind of agree with, you know, Bruce and Anne. For me, I was following in the footsteps, and I think Scott, I'm going to say that, you know, I think in general, we followed in Mike's recovery, and we did get him back at one point as well. And then we lost him a bit again, and he had a very similar rough ride. And so I think for Steph and I in general, that we were able to feel some level of security and comfort and not worried about him, because he was also living out on the streets a couple of times. Through his addiction, there were people chasing him for money. You know, he did some pretty bad things over the course of his addiction. So to have him go to treatment and to see him come back and have a smile on his face was amazing. So he was also going to university. So I think in the end, ultimately, I was comfortable with what was happening. I was sleeping better. You know, I knew he was happier. I could sleep with one eye open and one foot on the floor, not two eyes open and both feet on the floor, ready to, you know, deal with some sort of dilemma. But I think in the end, myself personally, and I you know, Steph can speak for herself after Mike passed away, I asked myself a ton of questions, because I didn't let my guard down. I always felt that once you were an addict, it was with you for the rest of your life. But Michael's life was falling into place. He graduated from university as an engineer. He had a beautiful girlfriend, full-time employment with a construction company, got a new puppy, and a week later, his girlfriend left town, and he decided that he was going to try, you know, the opioids again, and he passed away. He overdosed. And so my second kind of recovery for myself now personally is dealing with this without him. And so, you know, when Mike passed away, we did go and have some counseling, but I think we're in another stage of recovery ourselves right now. It's still pretty fresh. You know, for me, Mike passed away 3 years ago. It's gone by pretty quick. But I think that, you know, we're kind of in the second stage of recovery, trying to figure out ourselves now. And that's all I can say. So,
yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Joy that it takes a lot of courage to go down that road of recovery. And Mike was doing it for himself, but like Anne said, we got to see the beautiful side of it. We had 3 really, really fabulous years with Mike. And we never had another bad day after those 3 years until the day he died.
Every day was good.
He had, the relationships were back with his siblings, the relationship with us. And it is a beautiful thing to see. And it is amazing how resilient you are as parents, and how easy it is, or how hard it is for your child to understand, how can you love me so much? How can everything be so good after everything that I've put you through? And it just was.
Unconditional love.
And it's that trust is back very, very, very quickly. It'd be nice if everybody had the opportunity to experience really truthful recovery, because I think it is beautiful, and you become a very honest person. You just bare your soul to your loved ones.
Thanks, Steph.
We were lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, addiction is a chronic brain disorder. It can, there's epigenetics involved. It can be environment, it can be genetic predisposition, can be both, and it can go into remission for a long, long time, and it can come back out. And like other illnesses, we just love them. Yeah. So, Marshall, I'm gonna.
I was going to say, I just wanted quickly to add what Jan and Steffanie said, because I think they nailed it when they made the point that recovery is not just for the addict, but it's also for the family. Bruce accomplished a lot of good things in his life. He was a Canada Games boxer. He made the varsity basketball team. He was talented musically with hip hop or rap music. And we were proud of his success in all of those endeavors, but we were never prouder of him than when he was in recovery.
Mm.
And we made that clear to him through, letters and phone calls, etc. And because he was in recovery, we had hope. And Jan and Steffanie are right. It's just almost as much about the family as it is the addict.
Absolutely. I mean, the people that we love, ourselves included, are so much more than the disease. Marshall, you could have wrote half the book on it anyways. Do you want to, what is recovery to you?
For me, it's pretty simple. Understanding, I'm looking back, I was a sick person needing to get well, not a bad person needing to get good. And I think, society needs to spend more time thinking about that. There's a lot of people in rough shape. Sometimes we make some bad choices. Sometimes it's compounded by genetics, like you talked about. Either way, nobody wants to wind up in the middle of this thing. For me, recovery has been a tremendous transformation. It has been, the hallmarks of it have been about sobriety was number one for me. I can't use drugs or alcohol, period. There is no middle ground, and that's not negotiable. If I take a drink or use a drug, I will be right back where I started. And I can never forget that, even 15, 20 years after I sobered up. It's about health, looking after my health, and in all aspects, diet, exercise. It's about citizenship and being engaged and being of service in the most maximum way possible. Addiction took stripped me of my connection to society, of my obligations of citizenship. It took away my tools of citizenship and engagement and connection. And so those things are something that, I cherish very much. But above all, recovery is a pursuit. And I think you can move back and forth in your recovery. I hear a lot of times, relapse is part of recovery. And I would challenge that. Relapse is not part of recovery. It's part of addiction for sure. But recovery does not involve relapse. The disease does. And luckily for me, that hasn't been part of my story. I know it is for a lot of others. I've worked with 6,000 or 7,000 men in recovery, at this point in my career. But what keeps me going every day and what keeps me sober, above all else, is my recovery program. And for me, that's a 12-step fellowship. For other people, it's many other things. There's a lot of pathways to recovery. For me, that is what has worked. And I've had to take that very seriously. In my early recovery, it meant being very diligent. It meant keeping an open mind. It meant pushing myself to be honest about what was going on with me, to listen to what other people were saying to me, even though I very seldom wanted to hear what they had to say or trusted what they had to say. And I think today, at this phase of my recovery, 15 years later, it really is all about, paying it forward. My life is almost entirely consumed by service today. My CODA sponsor would probably say to me, it's too much service, but.
And what's CODA, Marshall?
Well, it's funny that you mention it. I have a program for my addiction. I also have another program for life, which is, I work on codependency. I work on, a lot of different aspects of my life that keep me balanced. And that's been important to me. So.
Yeah, good.
In the book, Stace.
What's that?
Get you the book.
Yeah, that's right. Get me the book. I'm also a person in long-term recovery, and for me, that means I haven't had a drink or a drug in over 32 years in a row. And but it means a lot more than just staying stopped. It means some health and well-being, and mental, emotional, spiritual, and all those different parts. And it's a day-to-day thing. One of our books talks about a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And really what that means is, how do I feel about myself today? If you want to see how I feel about myself on any given day, you just watch how I treat the people around me. And it's all an inside job for every single one of us. So I often talk about, if you're in recovery or not, the times in your life that you feel the best about who you are as a human being is usually when you're not thinking about yourself. And I definitely that way for me. If I'm miserable, I'm thinking about one thing, so recovery means a whole lot of different things. It's very fulsome. Now, this is a question I want to ask you guys. It's kind of a cool question. I think it's a totally cool question. It's simple. It's a very simple question. And so I'm going to leave this to you to put your hand up to answer. But if you knew in your life with 100% certainty, if you had 100% faith, what would you do? If you knew you could not fail in your life at anything you wanted to do, what would you do? And the phone lines are open.
We would do exactly what we're doing now. And that's establish the long-term recovery center in our son's name. But we've often said that, and this again is if we had no fear of failure and we had unlimited resources, because we don't need just one of these places in Winnipeg where we live. That's where we are, by the way. We need at least 10 of them. We need 5 for men. We need 5 for women. And that would be our life's dream, would be to establish as many addiction recovery beds as possible for both men and women. We're starting small. We have women on our mind next. That'll be our next project when we get this place up and running efficiently. But if we had, the short answer to the question is, we do just what we're doing now, but on a much bigger scale, right?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
I agree with Scott and Anne. I would probably do exactly what I'm doing now. To me, the job that I have, supporting the Minister of Mental Health and Addiction in their vision and his vision and the Premier's vision to, do what Anne and Scott believe as well, which is a massive expansion of this care system to enhance the quality of the care system. For me, I can't get enough of that. I'm engaged in that every day, and being able to do that type of work is a huge honor. And I couldn't imagine doing anything different right now.
Thanks, Marsh. Any other takers?
I would say for me, or I could speak for us, it would to be able to lose the vulnerability and find the confidence and find that first step or path to make sure no other family lost a child after just 3 years of recovery, that recovery was permanent. That would be what I would do to, if I knew I wasn't going to fail. I'm not quite at that point to still trying to find what my purpose would be. And I do believe I do have a purpose. I haven't found it yet, but it would directly relate to recovery and addiction.
Jen?
Well, I wanted to be a drummer in a rock band, but
Attaboy.
no, I think, you know, I'm myself personally, I don't think I would do anything differently that I'm doing now. I really do enjoy helping people, and I've done it a majority of my life. And as I get a little bit older here, and I know, Stacey, I told you I sold a portion of my business. You know, I'm hoping that eventually that I'll have some more time to actually physically go and help, not just attending our board meetings, but actually meeting with men that, you know, I can share my experience with.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Did Joy, you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I was just, you know, this was the hardest question to answer for me. And I actually think, listening to everyone, maybe it was because I'm actually doing what I love, right? I was thinking maybe I should be thinking about something different, but I think I would just do more of what I'm doing, and that would, the more would involve a better alignment with mental health and addiction. There was a doctor that worked with Eric, and he said to me, if you see mental health, think addiction, and if you see addiction, think mental health. And, you know, along his journey, there were times where I picked up a few gems like that. And I think, you know, the closer we can bring those two together, the more effective we're going to be in dealing with this. So yeah, just blessed to be doing what I do. And like I said, just more of it would be my dream state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so good to hear that from all of you. Like, you know, you know, be where your feet are, and you don't have any regrets, and you know, you're present, and you're not chasing after that time when you will be, you know, happy, etc. You're living it. So I'm hats off to you. Here's another question, which is, you know, I'll kind of boomerang this one out. Is I always ask the question. There's two I want to ask. This first one I'm going to ask is, what can you tell us about yourself that we wouldn't know? Most of you are all pretty much public figures, but what would you tell us that we wouldn't know? What's something that we wouldn't know? Okay, who had their hand up first? Can you guys?
Take Anne did.
Yeah, go, Anne.
I'm a way better gin rummy player than Scott is.
Well, I don't deny that. We're in the middle of our COVID-19 gin rummy tournament, and it's an ass kicking, and I'm providing the ass. I think if I had to say there's one thing about me that people, well, we're an open book. That's the problem with us, right?
Everybody knows everything about us.
This is why we have been able to get as far as we have with getting the Bruce Oake Recovery Centre built. I honestly sometimes have said it's not because we're heroes, it's because we just can't shut up and we drive people nuts. So I don't know. I can't think of one thing because we're so open that someone would not know about us.
Here's the label I'd like to put on it. How about genuine and authentic? That really works for me. That's you guys.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Good night, everybody. Good night.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Jan, Steph. What do we don't? What don't we know?
I would say most people know quite a bit about us, but they probably don't know I am a movie junkie, and I watch 6 to 8 movies a week. I've probably seen Pretty Woman 27 times.
So have I.
I bet you we're going to have every single person watching tonight going, me too.
Yeah.
Especially right now.
I don't know how to drive a standard vehicle.
Okay. All right, good.
Okay. So me now. I was a ping pong champion, and I'm absolutely scared to death of clowns.
Really?
Yes.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Jan is afraid of clowns. Thank you for that. Okay. That's going to be fun. Marshall, how about you?
Yeah, I'm with Jan. I don't like clowns either at all. But I'm a pickle junkie. I have a pickle fridge. I eat probably a jar of pickles a day. It's a thing. I have all kinds of pickles.
Well, that's good. Okay, next caller, Joy.
I'm obsessed with licorice. I was going to say I'm addicted to licorice, but I didn't think it really fit in this context. But we used to live in Australia, and I remember getting my mom to spend like $20 on the postage just to send me licorice, because back then it wasn't a thing in Australia. So now it's like a trip to Walmart and the family-size bags of licorice just for my evening snack. So.
Very good. Well, we got pickles and licorice. That's pretty good. Next question I'm going to ask you guys. I ask every panel, and it's an interesting question. I ask it to myself. So everything that you've been through in your life thus far, and yes, I know that you wouldn't change your experience because you wouldn't be where you are and who you are. So that is good. But if you had an opportunity to go back and sit down with yourself at the age of 20, like in a kind and loving way, what would you say? What would you say to that 20-year-old version of you? Who wants to go?
I would say, and I probably speak for Anne, given our experience, that I would say to my 20-year-old self, if you're going to get married and have kids, be ready for anything. Because clearly when we got married, the same as everybody else, you know, we dreamed of the idyllic, perfect life. Our kids would be raised in a loving home, which they were, and they would grow up to be contributing members of society. One is our boy Darcy is a world-class international illusionist, and he's making his mark in the world. And the other guy lost his life to addiction. So my 20-year-old self would be told, life's not going to be as perfect as you think. It might be, and get ready.
I agree.
Okay. Joy?
Hold my beer. No, this isn't my own wisdom, but right after Eric died, I met Rob Nash from the Rob Nash Project. And he said, you know, Joy, a lot of people are going to tell you everything happens for a reason. And he said, you know, for someone who's heard that a lot, it's one of the most hurtful things that you can hear. He said, try to think of everything happens with potential. And I was, you know, I think when I was looking at this question, I thought, wow, to be 20 years old and think about, you know, just have that frame, because life isn't going to be easy, as Scott said, right? We're going to get hit with some wild curveballs, and the only thing that's in our power is how we respond to that. And so, you know, that's where the potential lies in any of these really difficult life events that we know we're going to go through, whatever they look like. Somebody's going to get hit with something they don't want to deal with, but how we deal with it is where our answers are.
Okay. Marshall, you'd be like, dude, in 20 years, you're going to need a bigger fridge.
Or yeah, for sure. What was the question? In 20 years, what are we going to be doing?
No, if you could go back and talk to your 20-year-old self, what would
Oh,
you
man. Well, I mean, one thing is for sure. It would be, you know, lay off the booze and don't try the white stuff when it's offered to you. No question about it. I think that, you know, man, I don't know what I would say to my 20-year-old self, because the question almost implies that I have regrets for my addiction process and my recovery process. And while I certainly regret some of the things that I did in addiction, I don't really feel a lot of regret or resentment for having gone through that. And I think I'm a better person today as a result of having gone through that. And I'm certainly a different person today. And I don't know where my life would be today had I not just, followed the path that was there for me, or followed the path that I was on. I don't know, if it wasn't for addiction, if it wasn't for recovery, I wouldn't have, gone on to build treatment centers or be a counselor or, run sort of a national federation of addiction counselors, or gone on to, come back into government, or, look at system change, or interact with so many other parents. I would have been a different person. So I think I would say, the advice that I would tell myself is, let go, quit trying to control everything, go through life the way that it's laid out, try and make good decisions, and it is going to be what it's going to be. And I feel like, I hope that I would have wound up here in the same place. But I have no regrets. I have no regrets about the time that I spent in addiction. I tell you, I met some incredible people in my addiction, other people who were in it with me, other people who were on the streets with me. And I think, we make a lot of judgments and have a vision of who those people are. And the reality is that those people are a huge cross-section of our community. You never know who one of them is going to go on, into recovery and become, or do, or change the world, or the province, or the country. So no, I think that that's what I would say to myself. Just take your hands off the wheel. Let it happen.
That's a great answer. Jen, Steph, did we get you?
No, go ahead. Steph.
No. I would tell my 20-year-old self to try your very best to journal every single day. Good, bad, everything in between. Because now at my age, 41, I don't have a great memory, and I want to remember all of it. So I would tell my 20-year-old self to journal.
That's awesome. Jen?
I think for me, I would tell myself to slow down, and that the things that you think are important today won't be tomorrow, or a year from now, or 2 years from now. And I think a lot of young people, including myself, are in a rush for various different reasons too. I grew up in a very tough family. I grew up with a very successful father in construction, and I think for me it was just wanting things, way too quickly. And in the end, ultimately, if I reflect on what happened in my life, just a few years ago, the things that you think that are important today aren't tomorrow. There's a whole new things for me that are a lot more important than what I thought my life was going to be like.
Excellent. It's almost akin to what's happening around us right now in community with COVID and everything, right? Everything that we thought was so important, and that. So I'm looking. I think about the recovery process. I think about the recovery journey. I think about recovery is not a destination; it is a process. And it's different for every single person. There's many pathways to recovery, but we do know for sure that it's something, it's very real, it is attainable, and it is sustainable. And there's no magic formula. There are some key things that help. And that is the we part of what we have going on. Whether you're in active addiction or you're moving towards recovery, we just can't afford to do this alone. And so I'm sitting here thinking to myself that I know that there's people watching tonight. I absolutely know that there's people watching tonight that feel broken about their loved ones that are not, maintaining recovery and those kinds of things. But if you were sitting and you have the opportunity to say something to somebody who feels broken beyond repair, that total hopelessness, and you have a chance to do that right now, what are you going to say to them? And if you want to take a second, take a second. But what's that response? What are you going to say to somebody that feels they're broken beyond repair? Marsh?
Keep going. You know, when you're going through hell, keep going, right? I mean, that's you know, broken beyond repair. Quite frankly, I've never met a person like that. I've met a lot of really ill people, but never have I met somebody in addiction or in any of my work that was beyond repair. I have had the privilege of working with some of the absolute most downtrodden, complex, difficult cases, all of whom had the capacity to move forward from where they were at into something better, whatever that looked like for them. And some of them have gone through very striking transformation. So I guess I would just try and impress on them that, you know, I guess, and at the end of the day, I think the reality is, you know, Skid Row is a state of mind, which is something that I think we need to think about as well. There's a lot of hurting people out there. There's a lot of people, and you know, I understand because I've been in that place, who may feel like things are beyond repair. I haven't met one yet.
I agree. Who else wants to take that?
I would say, as just what Marshall said, but perhaps in a different way, there's always hope. We never lost hope for Bruce. I don't think he lost hope for himself, certainly not when he was in those brief periods of recovery, but we at no point did we ever give up on him. And I think the essential message is, yeah, I reject broken beyond repair too, because we never thought that way about Bruce, despite how low he had sunk sometimes. There was always hope. If you're breathing, there's hope.
Agreed. Anne, do you want to add to that?
Joy can go now.
No, go ahead, Anne.
Well, you just said it's exactly the same thing. Like, you know, we've met with lots of young people, and we always say, you just keep trying, you know, and as long as you're breathing, there's hope. So
I guess what I was going to say is something and again, I'm an outsider, so I don't understand the shame that someone who's dealing with addiction might feel, that guilt and shame. But I look at how the recovery movement has changed conversation, and people are celebrating their journeys. And you know, the biggest blessing in that is that they're a light for others. You know, that someone who feels that brokenness can look to the people who have achieved recovery. Like, thank you, Marshall, for everything you do. Right. You know, there's your entire team, Stacey, at Fresh Start, right? Everybody is a light for someone else that can anchor to that and realize that it you know, there's hope, there's things can be different, and it can get better, and it will be better. So to believe in that. And so that's why I appreciate the recovery movement so well, and everything, how it's changed the conversation around, you know, substance use and mental illness.
Thanks, Joy. Who do we have left?
Go ahead, Steph.
I would say that I agree with what everyone is saying. Nobody is broken beyond repair. I would tell that person that it must be incredibly painful to live with your mind as your own worst enemy, but you're not broken beyond repair. I don't walk in their shoes, but they don't need to walk in those shoes alone. And nobody is broken beyond repair. Just sum up what everyone else has said, that there is always hope.
Mm-hmm. Jen?
I think for me, I agree that, you know, don't stop, don't give up. But I think the other thing is just the experience that I've had is trying to explain that you're loved or somebody loves you, and the real you is missing. And, we know you're in there somewhere. And
Yeah.
I don't think if you don't quit, I think you can find yourself. And even again, in Mike's darkest days, I still don't believe that with that despondent that he couldn't get his, life back together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I think there is always hope. I like what Joy said. You've all talked about it. If I could find that switch inside somebody, because I know also too. I mean, look, we're all talking about the great, how great recovery is and all that stuff. And you guys have experienced recovery, and you've experienced the grief of not having recovery. And in this career over 3 decades, if I could find that switch within inside every single human being, and that self-forgiveness switch, I would find it. And Joy, you talked about that worthy piece as, there's a tool that I try to give to guys that I'm working with, and it's very simply this, and it can work whether you're in recovery or not. It's in your actions and your deeds. Try to treat yourself the way you would treat your own child, in your thoughts and in your deeds. And it sounds easy, but it's not. And because we often see guys like Mike build up a fantastic career in front of them of recovery and everything. In the 11th hour, something happens and they don't feel like they can get to that next step. And I know there's people watching here that feel that too. So one of the last questions, and I think we're about 6:15 in our time. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and but I do have a couple other questions. One is real simple. It's, what do you do when you're afraid? What do you do when you're afraid? And since I have Jan and Steph on the screen still, why don't we ask you first?
Is that on the list of questions?
No.
I didn't think so.
What would I do when I'm afraid? There's not a lot that I'm afraid of. I am afraid of my children getting sick. I'm sure everybody is afraid of something happening to their children. But when I get afraid, I actually just reflect on kind of what we have accomplished and what we have managed to do since Mike passed away. And that was my biggest fear. It's during his addiction, and even through, not so much through his recovery, but in active addiction, it was my biggest fear that he was going to die. And so when it did happen, I reflect back on that and know that I shouldn't be afraid. There's not very much else that can scare me. If that sounds selfish, or there's nothing that can threaten me worse than what has been taken away from me. But I am afraid of public speaking, and I'm afraid of horseback riding. So
Well, you guys have done pretty good tonight. Jan, what do you do when you're afraid?
Well, I'm going to say the same thing. Outside of clowns, I think that realistically, the 5 years while Michael was in active addiction were probably the toughest years of my life. Tough on our family, tough on a bunch of stuff. So I used to get scared before, and maybe pray or meditate or whatever. But now for me, again, there's nothing really that I'm really afraid of. So it was a tough go. And so that was probably the hardest thing that we've ever done in our entire life, to have to deal with that. And I agree with Steffanie. I don't think there's anything else that could hurt me anymore other than, another loss of a family member.
Understood. Feel that. Marshall, what do you do when you're afraid?
I head for the pickle fridge. Call my sponsor. I pick up the phone. I have people in my circle that I've cultivated around me. We talk all the time. We rely on each other. That's how I get through it. I have trusted people that I surround myself with, you know, who give good advice. And, you know, I try in everything that I do not to make decisions in isolation, not to stew on issues, to, you know, reach out, connect at every opportunity. And, you know, it diminishes. They're fleeting moments, but they happen at several times working in politics during the day. So no problem. You get conditioned to it.
Yeah, no doubt. Joy?
I'd have to echo exactly what Jan and Steph said. You know, someone told me that another parent had lost a child. They said, Joy, you'll never be scared of anything again. And it's true. From my perspective, the only thing that would ever scare me is losing another one of my sons. But last year I was diagnosed with cancer. At the time before we knew it was early stage, it was like, thank you, God, for giving me something I can manage this time. And I don't want to diss anyone's cancer journey in any way, but if that maybe puts into perspective, at least from my experience of what losing a child meant, child loss, I think, is everyone's worst fear. And in my life experience so far, the only thing that could be greater than that would be losing another one. So.
Thanks, Joy. Well,
we have to agree with them as well, because we spent so many years being afraid during Bruce's journey with addiction, and we had knots in our stomach every single day as we were rescuing him from one bad event to another. And then when the worst possible thing happened, other than, like the others said, other than losing your other child, nothing could scare us anymore.
There's I guess the common theme is, you know, go back to that age-old question, what's the worst thing that can happen? And the worst thing that can happen to a parent happened to Anne and I, and to Jan and Steffanie and to Josh. And sure, lots of times in our life in the 9 years since Bruce passed away, we've been faced with, I don't know, situations where we'd say, what are we going to do now? But nothing could be as bad as that day, March 28th, 2011, when we got the call that no parent should ever get. So, you know, what could be worse? So there is really no one single thing that has got the better of us with respect to fear since then. And I can't see one coming.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank all of you. I always say that the person that says that they're not afraid is usually one of, you know, screaming, I don't fear anything. You guys laid it out beautifully. I would ask this last question, and we're 6:20 now, and we've got 10 minutes left, and I've got a few things I need to wrap up with, and it's been really good to see you all. It just heartfelt, it really has. And I so want to just thank you for giving us your time. Like, it's a huge gift. And everybody that's watching, there's a question that's come up in a couple of spots here, and it just came up here. I'm not monitoring the questions, but I think I'm going to ask this last question. Are you guys good with that? You didn't have it before, so so really wonderful examples of good people trying to do their best. Thank you for your honesty all around. What 3 things do you think families need to be aware of to help their children be aware of addictions so they can be aware of it in their own behaviors? Thank you so much for this. So somebody's saying, you know, what 3 things do you think families need to be aware of to help their children to be aware of addictions so that they can be aware of it in their own behaviors? Who wants to tackle that? Okay, Marshall, you're first.
I would say this. I would say be very gentle with yourself. Pay attention. As much as your instinct is to focus on your loved one's addiction, running into that fire and getting in there with them likely is not going to be what helps them. What's going to help them is you looking after yourself which is totally antithetical to a parent's instinct, and I understand that. But self-care in that situation and getting help so that you can stay clear and well-boundaried and in control, if there is such a thing, of what is going on for you, is how you help them. I would say, again, be gentle with yourself. Recognize they're sick people needing to get well, not bad people needing to get good. You didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. It's a serious illness. It's highly treatable, and recovery for the majority of people who initiate this illness is highly possible. And the evidence of that is all around. Surround yourself with parents who have been through this. Attend mutual self-help meetings. Get the nourishment and support you need to stay strong. Set good boundaries, and always, always, always believe 100% that there's light at the end of the tunnel and it will work. And unfortunately, it doesn't always, as we've heard from my great co-panelists here. But while you're in it, you can never, ever stop believing that it's going to work out.
Thanks, Marshall. Not everyone has to answer, but you can if you want.
Can you repeat the question, please?
What 3 things do you think families need to be aware of to help their children be aware of addictions so they can be aware of it in their own behaviors?
So I think for myself, and I won't speak for Steph, but I think many families have a huge history of some sorts of addiction, whether it's drugs or alcohol. I think parents need to realize that. I think they need to be brutally honest with their kids when it comes to not candy coating that drinking and drug use can lead to absolute disastrous lifestyle. And I think that for myself, I would think that the most important thing is allowing them to speak and allowing them to be honest and be able to deal with that issue, I guess. You don't want to be in a position that Steph and I were in, that you find out when it's a little too late. So I think open discussions around alcohol and drug abuse, and I don't want to say abuse, but drug use, I think they're discussions that can't be swept underneath the rug. And I think the other thing that's associated with it as well is history of mental health in families. I think there's a huge correlation that was said tonight between addiction and mental health and addiction. And I believe in our instance, our son suffered from, I think it was compounded both through drug abuse and mental health issues. So I would really, encourage people to be honest and to have these discussions well in advance of when the problem rises. I think in society in general, both of these issues are being dealt with better, but I still think we can do a way better job in communicating to young people the devastation that can happen with alcohol and drug abuse.
Absolutely. So I know that Anne and Scott and Joy, I know that you could add to this for sure. Absolutely. And you 3 have covered it really well. If you'll allow me, I would like to keep us on track and get to the time where I want to be respectful of your time, and I know it's later in some parts for you, and you need to get on with your evenings. Before I have my last words in, does anybody have any questions that you'd like to ask me? Joy.
Thanks. I'm actually just curious because there's, this is Fresh Start's community panel. I really appreciate that and the space that you've given all of us, but I'd really love to know how things are at Fresh Start right now. Like, how has COVID affected the team, the organization, the men? How are you all faring? How are you?
Yeah, I've got a phenomenal team. I am beyond grateful to have who we have. And I think the staff are handling it really well. Like, we were deemed an essential service, and everyone stepped up, suited up, literally. And I know that the men have been going kind of stir crazy, and cabin fever and stuff. So, we did some things to mitigate that. We're taking, bus trips out with the guys. They've all been living in the same house. And so the social distance occurs. Wait a minute, I can just plug that for Marshall. They are distanced at wherever they land. And so that's kind of breaking it up a bit. With all the events and everything that have been canceled, Joy, I'm thinking about fundraising and meeting our budgets and doing those kinds of things. But here's what else I know is that the work that we do, the work that we get to do, is far greater than all of us. So things are going to work out okay. It'd be great if people are watching, if you hopped online and checked out our website, freshstartrecovery.ca, and buy a raffle ticket for a motorcycle. There's, everything just shut right down. There's a bunch of donors that we have that have stepped up recently, which is incredibly moving, and they began a donor matching program. So that's on our website and stuff too. So we still gotta, provincial government's been great. They've been supportive. Alberta Health Services has been excellent. They've been great with giving us PPE and all that kind of thing. I swear to God, though, when it comes time to get a campfire in the summer, I'm leery to go near it, man. I feel like I'm flammable with all the hand sanitizer. So I'm sure you feel the same way. But overall, I think we're doing pretty well. The board's been great, staff are great, and we're full, except for our quarantine room, which is not in use. Okay, I need to move us on. Okay, guys. Again, I want to say I have a ton of love for all of you. I'm super grateful for your time, and I'm pretty safe to say that everyone else feels the same way. Usually at this time we have a group photo, and then on the back of our annual report every year we have that photo from the panel discussion. So this year's photo is going to be kind of neat. And Lauren's in the background handling things, so I'm asking if Lauren can do a screenshot. So this is actually going to be our group photo, guys. So if you can sit up nice and straight and take a picture, and then Lauren's gonna, and I don't know how long it's going to take her to do the screenshot. So let's just smile and hold for a few seconds. And how's that? You guys are awesome. And there is a gift that we typically like to give you as well with the panel that coincides with our annual report, and so we will be sending those out to you. That said, everybody online, I don't know if you can tweet out some sort of thank you to Norton Rose Fulbright for lending us their Zoom platform tonight and hosting the event, and their Lauren Collins. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Lisa and Jillian, and we couldn't have done this without you. I know that, again, like I said, it's going to be on our YouTube channel. If anyone's watching and you have any comments or any questions, feel free to send it to info@freshstartrecovery.ca. So info@freshstartrecovery.ca. And at the end of the day, I think you guys did a fantastic job. Thank you all so much. Thank you everybody who attended. Good night. God bless. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Take care.
You too.
Nice meeting everybody.